Okay, we got 3 more minutes. 2 now. All right. We're going to say welcome, everybody, since we already recorded. welcome, everyone, to the Royal Rulers in Training and walking in the name as priests. And I am Odiela Jackson from the Anointed Life Mindset Master Mentor Coach Odiela Jackson. I'm going to get that right one day. At ZKI Institute of Pneumatology. And our Zoom ID is 634-061-7114. And the code is 708749. We're here on Wednesdays and Thursdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we're glad that you all here, those who are watching live and those who will see this recording. All right, tonight we have our guest back here for part 3, right? This is part 3. And I guess Katura tonight. Thank you for being here, Katura.
It is always my pleasure. Thank you so much for the opportunity and for the invite.
All right, so I'm gonna turn this over to you, Kate. You gotta use the screen. That's what I gotta do. I forgot I was supposed to do that. And that would be weird in the chat. Participant. And then I'm gonna have to go get mine now. All right. So says make you the host. You are now the host, Couture.
Okay, awesome. So a pleasant night to everyone. Just testing my sound. Am I loud and clear? Yes, awesome. All right, so I'm Katura, as Holy Sister Odiela did the introduction. Katura Bartholomew, one of the master mentors at the Zinke Katura International Institute of Pneumatology. Long name, so I guess for short we can just say Anointed Life. Today we're going to continue on. Last week, as a matter of fact, I started on the series that was taken from a book that I wrote, a short book. Well, the screen doesn't permit me to share it. However, it's called Becoming the Best, and it's a book that is designed specifically for the age group from about 12 and above to help kids develop confident character on biblical principles. Today, we're going to have a look at spiritual law number 3. I believe the first week we did spiritual law number 1. And in spiritual law, let me just dismiss that. In spiritual law number 3, which is found in the book, the title is The Paths of Integrity Are Straight, while the paths of the no character are winding. My apologies for the typo there.
Don't forget to let mine now in.
All right, cool.
Sorry.
Let me admit. What? Yes, all right. So, welcome in the room to Lionel. Pleasant night to Lego B. How are you guys doing tonight?
Great.
Great. How are you doing, Lionel?
Doing good.
Doing good. I see Holy Sister Odiela posting some amazing videos. I want to say a massive congratulations on your progress so far. I mean, it's really awesome to see the growth and to see how, how lovely you're developing from the time frame that I've known you to now. I can say that there is significant growth and maturity. So I want to keep up the good work, kiddo.
Thank you.
So let's jump into today's discussion. Have you guys ever heard of the story of the children of Israel's journey in the wilderness that took 40 years when it was supposed to take 11 days? You guys ever heard of that story before?
Don't think so.
Don't think so? Okay. How would you, Lionel?
Repeat the question. My phone lagged.
If you ever heard of this story with the children of Israel who journeyed in the wilderness for 40 years when it was supposed to take 11 days. Ever heard of that?
No.
You guys ever saw what's the name of this movie? The Prince of Egypt? Prince of Egypt. I know it's a popular movie. Anyone?
No, I've not. I haven't seen that one either.
All right. Well, if you guys can, I would recommend after we finish this class that you have a look at it. It's very interesting. It's a story about Moses, and it's animated, so it's going to keep you entertained. But the thing is with the story, when the children of Israel left Egypt, they were supposed to go to the promised land, and it was supposed to take only 11 days. But instead, it took 40 years. Now, I'm not even 40 years yet. So I could imagine that's a heck of a long journey. And that probably would sound crazy to this generation because we are all too familiar with our devices. Like if we want to go somewhere, we just ask Alexa, ask Siri, we put it in Google Maps, Waze, all these different things that we're familiar with. And GPS will help us to navigate to go wherever we need to go. But back in their days, they did not have GPS, unfortunately. I don't even know if they had maps. So they certainly did not have access to technology as we do. So when Moses approached Pharaoh to set his people free, he was faced with stubbornness and much resistance until eventually Pharaoh decided to grant them freedom. Now, he didn't do it because he was excited to let them go. He did it because he was experiencing the wrath of his own decisions. And this was supposed to be the start of a new life for them, a new uncorrupted life. But instead, it was the beginning of and the end for many, because instead of making it to the promised land, some of them died in the wilderness. So popular movies like the one I was talking about, The Prince of Egypt, help us to get a mental picture of what the children of Israel experienced. I think that there's another movie done on that. I'll look it up for you guys. But in short, Yahweh Elohim, are you guys familiar with the name? That's the name of God. He heard their cries, and Moses was the one who took on the identity of God. He functioned like God to deliver them from the wicked hand of Pharaoh. And after leaving Egypt, they were supposed to journey to the promised land where they could enjoy freedom, they could enjoy their lives. But this is where the story is a bit disheartening. As I said, it was supposed to take 11 days, it took 40 years, and lives were lost in the wilderness. Now, there's a huge lesson that we should learn from this experience. There's a reason why I'm emphasizing on this. The children of Israel spent their days in the wilderness complaining and comparing their lives to the experiences in Egypt. And they did this because of something called a reference point. Now, I'm sure you guys ever saw what a compass looks like? Anybody's in Boy Scouts or those clubs where they have you see what a compass looks like if you're going on a trail. You guys familiar with that?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the compass.
Right. How about you, Lionel? And I see Candice Will is in the room. Pleasant night, Candice Will.
Pleasant night to you too.
Lionel, do you know what a compass is? If you're there, I'm not so sure if you would have stepped away. All right, so whilst Lionel is attending to the mic, a compass is like, I wish I had one to show you guys. It's a small device that has north, west, north, east, south, and west. And it helps whoever is using it to understand, well, if I need to go north, you put the compass and it will show you which direction you're at and where you should go. Now, I know these things are like, for this generation, ancient, because as I said, you guys, your tablets, your phones, your laptops, your device have everything right now. But, once upon a time, before the internet existed, there were other things that we used to navigate. And so a reference point is just like that compass. A reference point is something that people would use to help them identify which direction they should go in life. And so the children of Israel found themselves complaining and comparing because they were using their experience in Egypt as their compass for life. And that was based on artificial things and not good character. So by that, I mean they were complaining about food. The mere fact that they complained about food means that while they were in Egypt, they probably had better meals. And now they're out in the wilderness and they don't have the same type of food that they had in Egypt. They will complain about the elements, they will complain about everything. And that's because they were living from the reference point of like dust, things made of the dust. Now, this is something that I want you guys to understand. It's very important. Once you understand this, it's going to help you make good decisions, functional decisions, and not be like them. The reason why we look at them is not to condemn them and think, oh, we're better than them, but so that we can understand life lessons that they learned so that we don't have to repeat them. That's the good thing about the Bible. It helps us understand what were the mistakes that they made so that we can live better lives. And so they were always judging God by his ability to match their lives with what they saw and experienced in Egypt. So they pretty much were trying to measure their lives with the lives of the Egyptians. Now that's a dangerous thing to do. A lot of like I remember when I was growing up, I went to school when I went to a private school when I was a kid. And in that school, there were a lot of kids who came from wealthy families. I did not come from a wealthy family. I came from, I would say, the average home. My mom and my dad worked very hard to provide for us. And in that school, there were kids who came from millionaire families. And as a child, because I did not know what I'm teaching you guys here, I found myself many times feeling miserable because I would compare like birthday gifts to what these kids get. Now, their parents, as I said, millionaires, right? And so the kind of things, gifts that they would have, like the kids that I went to school with, they had pools in their backyard. And I'm not talking about the blow up pool, the real deal kind of pool, the in ground pool. And they had like swings and they had all these ride on cars. And back then, those things were very, very expensive. And so only a particular class could experience that. And, their parents would be the ones when they have birthdays to order pizza for the whole class. Now, pizza back then too wasn't something cheap. And so I was around kids who experienced lavish lifestyles. And I did not know better. And I found myself comparing what I would get to what they would get. Now, the thing about comparing is that the person who ends up miserable is you, the person who are comparing, because you'll always find yourself feeling like you lack and that you're void. And because you lack and you're void, you don't, you're not able to appreciate the things that you have in front of you and to have gratitude because you're always thinking that life owes you better and that you deserve better. Now, you deserve better, but not from the point of comparison. And so just like me, the children of Israel found themselves comparing, and it only brought them misery. Their mindsets and their hearts were not on equity for all but self-benefit. Now, the thing about it is that do you think that you can compare, let's say it's your birthday, and your mom and dad or whoever's your guardian, your grandma, your aunt, whoever's in charge of you, bought you a cake. One of those box cakes that you have to add water and, stuff like that. They bought you that because that is what they can afford. And they whipped up a nice little cake for you. And your best friend also celebrates his birthday or her birthday in the same month. And instead, their parents were able to afford fancy cake that they ordered. The print on it looks fantabulous. Do you think you would be able to appreciate what you have if you're busy comparing it to the other person? Like if you're watching their cake and thinking, gosh, I wish I had that cake. Do you think that when you taste your cake, that you'll even have the competence to enjoy it and the hard work and the sweat that went into it? What do you guys think? You can feel free to unmute.
I feel like if you comparing your cake with your friends, and if you think that your friend's cake is better than yours, then obviously you're going to not have that satisfaction. you're just
Well
gonna
said.
think that the cake is bad.
Exactly. I see Lego, we mic was unmuted. You want to say something?
Mm. It was basically what Canon said.
Nice. So it means that, and you know what the funny thing is? It could mean that your cake tasted a whole lot better, the ones that your parents or whoever put the work into, but you're so busy. The person who compares is so busy, obsessed with the idea that that other cake tastes better, that they're actually missing out on the goodness that's provided here because they're trying to get something else over there. And you know, you guys may think, okay, well, that's ridiculous. That's crazy. Why would I do that? But do you know that there are grown people doing that today, all around us, comparing cars, comparing families. I know people who compare, I know there are people who can't have kids, for example. And instead of looking at the opportunities that the Holy Spirit has provided for them, they compare their lives to people who have kids and think that their life is miserable because they don't have the ability to make kids. And when they do that, imagine spending your existence comparing and complaining. The good things in life, you're actually missing out on it when you do that because it could have meant that the Holy Spirit provided other ways for you to enjoy life and other ways to invest into kids through adoption. And you know, people, I'm just using this as an example, right? People who obsess about, oh, I can't have kids and this and that, could have been enjoying the fruitfulness of a family through adoption, which could be 10 times better for them because of their circumstances. But instead, we get trapped in comparison. And that's one of the things that took place in the Garden of Eden. When the serpent came to Eve, he was telling her, eat this and you'll be like God. You know what happened there? She started to compare herself. Am I really that good enough? And so humanity is repeating the same mistake over and over and over. And there are grown people comparing, you know, salaries. That's why they're working so hard. I need to make this amount of money. I need to go on this vacation because my friend went on a vacation too. There are grown up adults scrolling Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, watching other people's lives and thinking that that is what their life should look like. And in doing that, they're just making themselves miserable and repeating the mistake of the children of Israel in the desert. Now, the thing about comparison to, and well, what took place with the children of Israel is that they became like spoiled brats, despite the demonstration of the miraculous things that happened, like dividing the Red Sea, being led with a cloud during the day and at night a pillar of fire. They had an abundance of water to drink. They had manna to eat, even meat at one time. When they asked God for meat, he sent quail, a bird, a type of bird, and they had so much to be grateful for. But in spite of all of that, they chose to blame Moses, to blame Moses and say, Moses, you bring me out here to die. Look at what you did. We were better with whips on our back. You see how illogical that sounds? Imagine they wanted to go back into slavery. Now, what do you guys think about it so far? I want to hear you guys your feedback. Anybody? Tell me what you're getting from this story so far.
What I got from one of the stories, you know, when Eve was thinking if she was good enough.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's basically how today's standards, you know, people are wondering if they're good enough for this certain thing or if they're good enough to help their family or something.
Yeah, so they question whether or not they are enough, basically. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
That's a good observation. That's true.
Even though I kind of came in a little late, but so far what I'm getting is that we should probably be really careful of what we're making our reference points to be, because if we're focusing on something that isn't what God would end up thinking about us, it could lead us into a very bad path, I guess you could say.
That's so true. I love how you said that. Because the dangers of doing that is that we when we compare with others, we are like sowing a seed that is eventually going to develop and grow into a tree and bear fruit. And it's not going to be fruits that we will appreciate in the end run. So the problem with this with Israel is that they were supposed to be a nation that was set apart from other nations, which means that they were supposed to be holy. Holy means to be set apart. And this meant that they should not have been using all of these different things to determine their worth. It's like how Lego we was saying just now, to determine whether or not they're good enough. So they should not have used things like meat, clothing, food, shelter to determine whether or not they were really chosen or they were really set apart. And it's much like any society today where we see people using things like money. Now you guys are getting older and going to be exposed to a lot more as you grow up. And people use things like education. I grew up in a school because I went to private schools. Education was a reference point. And so let me just give you a little bit of insight into the Caribbean where that is concerned. In the Caribbean, education is a high priority. And so when I was younger, at the end of like the day in my school day, let's say school starts 8:30 and finishes about 2:30, I would have homework, which would occupy at least 2 to 3 hours of the evening. So by the time you get home, spend most of the evening doing homework. They prepare for the next day. At the end of the week, they have quizzes. So they give you something called mental. Mental is like timetables. So they'll ask you 8 times 5, this, or they'll tell you 100 plus 300. So depending on the grade that you're at, they'll give you questions to do, fitting for your grade, right? And then in vocabulary, they'll give you spelling tests, like spell the word hippopotamus. Then sometimes you have to write words and write definitions, spell the word integrity. So I learned to read and write by the time I was age 4. Now that's how here in the Caribbean things are a lot different. They don't really pace you, they drill you. And so the thing is, the drilling also comes with a lot of, back in my time, now they're a little bit less strict. But in my time, if you get, let's say you have 10 questions and I get 8 out of, let's say I get 6 out of 10, I will get a spanking in school. Like they'd literally give you licks on your hands. The teacher would have this big wooden stick and pop, pop. And go home and don't play after school, study your work. Depending on how bad you do, you get a whooping on your butt in school. And so that's how it was in my school days. So that wasn't anything that we could play with. Our education was something we had no choice but to take it seriously. Then when you reach a certain grade, let's say about grade 5 or 6, where you will, we'd have to write a major exam. And to prepare for that exam, you'd have to go something called lessons. Lessons is extra classes. So there was a time I was in school from at 7 o'clock in the morning. Lessons started an hour before school. School starts 8:30. After school finishes, lessons in the evening. So imagine finishing school and having to do more school. So lessons went on for another 2 hours. Then on a Sunday, I had to do lessons again to prepare for this exam. And I'm talking about 10, 11-year-old me. When all, and this is something that's normal. So most 10 and 11-year-olds in the country do this. And on a Sunday morning, I have to get up bright and early to go lessons 9 to 11, sometimes 12, depending on the teacher. And then when you finish lessons, you still have homework to do because the lesson teacher giving you homework, your school teacher giving you homework. So you just full with work to do, no free time. And so because of how they drill us here in the Caribbean, education becomes a reference point. And so a lot of parents would feel to drill their kids because they feel a sense of obligation because parents now start to compare whose kid is doing better than whose kid is an A+ student, whose kid is getting into this prestige school, because here we have prestige schools that are upper class, so to speak, and you have to drill your kids to get into them. And so it becomes a competition and a race. And the kids also become very obsessed with education, that those who make it in that system start to look down on those who are not. That's what a reference point does in its fullest. Makes you feel like you're better than the other person because they have not gotten what you have gotten. And so to date, now they still don't have like whooping in school. They removed that recently, corporal punishment, but they still execute discipline in different ways. So like in some schools, they put you to do horse stand, put you to stand up with your hands in the air. You know, they have different ways of enforcing discipline without using a ruler. And it's still a bit militant, but not as before in schools in Trinidad today. What do you guys think about that? Is that the first time you hear a story like that? I see Holy Sister Odelia's comment.
I'm
I
like,
guess
that's
you could say
rough.
that's the first time.
Yeah,
I-
that's kind of rough.
I think
Mhm. Especially I come from homeschool.
I think I might have heard about this type of schooling before, but I thought that was not true. Because isn't the parents supposed to discipline, not the teachers, unless you got permission? But there has to be the parents.
Yeah, it's not really heard of in the like Americas, like where you guys are in Canada, but in the Caribbean, that's pretty normal to get whooping in school in front of your friends. Imagine getting whooping and your friends standing up watching you. The embarrassment. I went through that. No, I wasn't a naughty girl in school. I was one who was on top of my grades because I was scared. I was like so afraid. You have no idea. And so for me, I would do my work to the best of my ability. I would listen to the teachers to the best of my ability because they had some rulers that were wooden rulers and about this thick, right? So imagine the weight of that coming on your small hands. For the boys, I saw eyewitness boys in my school. The teacher holding their pants against their skin and buttocks in front of the school, right? Leo laughing here. And they're crying, ouch, ooh. And the more you move is the more like because they feel like you're not listening. More whooping you get. And so with that now, imagine the children of Israel getting whoopings. Leave the whoopings. Going out in where they're supposed to head to the promised land and telling Moses, we were better off when we were getting whooping. When we getting spankings and all that. Now their spanking was not like in school. In school would have been controlled. They had slave masters who had whips and they would beat them across their backs, would mark their skin. And it wasn't that they would give them one or two attacks across their skin on their arms would be sore. And they chose to look back at Egypt and say, we were better off when we were there because they were feeding us. Now, when I hear something like that, it makes me sad because it makes me realize that these people spend so long immersed in that to them that is normal, that is life, that is what that's what everyone is supposed to experience. And so God had to take them out of that environment, have them purge their minds from it for a bit, spend that time clearing the lifestyle, having new patterns, new behaviors, a new way of living. And when we read the Bible, sometimes we think that God is kind of strict with them. Look how God treated them. But the thing is, God knew that the culture that they came out from was a very corrupt culture. Not only were they accustomed to that type of lifestyle of being beaten, but they were exposed to idolatry and a lot of pagan things. And so when God now gives them the commandments, what he is basically telling, what he did with them was give them a new way to live, a new way that expresses what it is like to be holy, what it is like to not be corrupt, which is why they were very strict on things like stealing. You know, sometimes you read the commandments and you see an eye for an eye and a hand and chop the hand off. And a lot of things that sounds barbaric. What really and truly he was trying to reinforce a disciplined mindset into them of equity. Because how is it just unfair that you can steal, let's say, one goat from your neighbor and you just serve a 10-day sentence? You don't know what the neighbor had to do to get that one goat, how hard he had to work. And so what God established through the law was simply the law of equity, where it is just and fair and safe for everyone to exist and coexist with each other. So come back to this story now about reference points. We see that this is something that I'm going to share. I'm going to break it down with you. When you adopt a reference point, it becomes your principle, which means that you would use that to help you make decisions for life. So let's look at education. My experience here in the Caribbean. With education, people who use that as their reference point will always make decisions that benefits education. If your reference point is money, people who like to make plenty money. Now, nothing is wrong with making money because we are, as saints, supposed to create income and create wealth, just like King Solomon did. But if we become obsessed with it, where we are doing it to now feel valuable, it becomes a reference point. Our value and our worth could never come from education, which is why whether you have qualifications or no qualifications in the kingdom, it really doesn't matter to God. He does not see. He does not see certificates. All he sees is the spirit. He sees character. He sees integrity. So that's why there are some people who could be a wall full, well decorated with certificates. And when it comes to character, they have none because they have used the certificates to help them determine their worth. And what we do as saints, we don't use things like education to determine our worth. We get educated because it helps us function in this society. But with or without a whole wall full of plaques and trophies and all these things, it does not interfere with our value as saints. We don't use even sports. There are athletes who will kill themselves out in sports because they're using that to get value. As saints, we don't use that for value. If we are doing sports, we're just expressing Yahweh in the sport. We're not doing it to make us become a good person. Another way is money. When you guys start to work, whether you make a big salary or a small salary, or you start a business and it's bringing in plenty income or not, Holy Sister says codependent indeed. It does not matter your salary. Your value comes from your spirit. All of these things are made of the dust. And so we are not to get obsessed with the dust, even playing games, because I know we have a few gamers in here. Whether or not you win the game, you win the what you call this thing? They have these online gaming systems. I don't remember the name. Some you say servers. I don't remember what it is. But whether you win the mode or whatever it is or not, it does not interfere with your value or your. And so their experience was lengthened in the desert because they choose to live as though they were Egyptians and trying to bring that culture into the promised land. Now, the thing is, as saints, the kingdom realm is just like Wi Fi. Now, we have phones, we have tablets, you guys have iPads, all these different things, wireless headphones, earbuds, all of these things connect to the router. The router is the thing that has all the cords plugged into the wall, right? We exist, like right now in your bedroom, there is a signal going on that allows your device to connect it. It's invisible. Some of you have 5G, 4G, 3G, depends on where you are. The Holy Spirit functions just like that Wi Fi, where we are connected by an invisible realm that exists in this. We can't see it with our own eyes, with the naked eyes, but the realm exists nonetheless. And just like the Wi Fi signal, for us to benefit from the kingdom, we have to stay on the kingdom frequency. Does that make sense to you guys? Tell me what you think about that. So
Yeah, that makes sense. Since you're comparing the Wi-Fi, it's definitely I could see it like, hey, that is brings a good comparison.
yes. So if we choose, now thinking about the Wi-Fi, if we choose to be in union with the Holy Spirit that fills the entire universe, it means that we have to understand how that frequency works. That frequency does not work with dust, with things of the dust. It works by things like integrity and equity. So here's a simple example how we work how we function in the kingdom, right? You would see any Bible, the prophets like Moses would pray. He would say, "Thus says the Lord," like how he made decrees to Pharaoh, the Egyptians, about plagues coming on the land and hail and all of these different things. Do you know that for him to speak those words and for those words to come true, he had to be on the same frequency with God? He could not be off the frequency and seeing those things happen, which is why we're learning what we're learning here. Because once we understand how that frequency works, it means just like Moses, we could make decrees and it will happen. Because all of creation will start to work with us, for us, together. It's just like how when Elijah was hungry, you all remember the ravens came and fed him food? Because he was on the God frequency. So the birds got the message in the spirit. They got it by thought. Bring food for Elijah. Now, that is how awesome this frequency is. You could be anywhere. People will be driven to come by you, by thought, by being on the same frequency. It's like a walkie-talkie. Long time, I just say long time because I don't know if you guys know about things like walkie-talkies, but but once upon a time, there were walkie-talkies that exist, and we could press the button and say, Alpha, Bravo, this, come in. And the other person would have to be on the same channel to hear what I'm saying. Now, if you change the channel on the walkie-talkie, just like an old-time radio, if you change the channel, you'd hear something else. You would not hear what I am saying. It's the same thing with God. If we want to hear what God is saying, we have to make sure we tune in to that channel so that when God says something, we can hear it. Or so that when we say something, He can hear it, so that the communication goes both ways without any disturbance. And so that's kind of like how the kingdom realm functions, via frequency. And so that's why the children of Israel needed Moses to talk to God for them, because they were not on this frequency. So God will be speaking, and it's like they're not hearing a thing, like deaf to Him. That's because they chose a different frequency by choosing a different reference point. If this makes sense to you guys, unmute and let me know reference point.
Our reference point is Jesus, Elohim, and well, I'm gonna give it one more different name. We call Jesus Elohim, which is Elohim.
Nice. Love it. Thank you so much for sharing, Legobi. Holy Sister says, who has an ear to exactly? The ones who will hear what the Spirit has to say will be the ones who are in tune with the Spirit. Otherwise, the Spirit will be speaking and it passing over their heads. Same frequency. And so, if we choose to be in union with the Holy Spirit that fills all things, just like it filled the birds that brought food for Elijah, is the same way that Jesus could tell the fishermen, the disciples, casting nets on the other side. The fish moving by thought, same frequency, whoosh, they come across, net full, carrying fish home, everybody happy. All of the creation functions in union with them. We have even tested this with the weather, where sometimes you want to step out and it's raining, and all we need to do, by thought, change the weather. It's the same thing we see with Moses. I mean, Moses is a classic example. There are other examples that just kind of come to my mind at the moment. But all the other priests and the prophets were tuned into the same frequency. There's a next story that comes to mind too. The frequency that Esther worked with. Now, how many of you remember the story of Esther? Anybody familiar with it here?
I am.
You are? Nice. So this is the said yes.
Yeah, pretty much.
So let's just quickly review what happened with Esther. This thought is right. So Esther, you know, her parents died, her mom and her dad, which meant that she was an orphan. Her uncle Mordecai adopts her as his own, takes her in like a daughter, right? Mordecai now is working at the king's palace, I think it is, or king's gates. It so happened that the events, now this is something that we could discuss in another session, where sometimes we see things happening and we don't understand why. Why is this happening? But it all works out. So Esther ends up with Mordecai. Do you know that Esther saved the Jews from genocide? Because the king had a right-hand man who was on a frequency of self-gain. His name was Haman. Haman is his name, boy? Trying to remember his name. I think it's Haman. I know beginning it had something with an H in it. And so his frequency was living according to self. How could he benefit? And so he got the king to make some really selfish decisions. One of them was he declared that the Jews would be killed. And they had a decree at a certain date, at a certain time, genocide was about to take place. Because of Esther's presence and Esther's integrity and equity, the Jews were saved. Now, if Esther was on self-benefit, she would have done what she did with the king to save herself. But she did not go to the king with the intention of saying, "Oh, my Lord, please save me." She said, "If it would please you, consider my people," which means that she was considering everyone, everyone who was called by the same name. And that's a frequency of integrity and equity. Because of that, Mordecai was promoted. Now, this is a story I can probably go through in depth with you because I really think it's helpful to understand how things would work together for you when you start to function on the frequency of integrity and equity. Her uncle Mordecai was promoted. He was like functioning as the king's right-hand man. And Esther not only saved her people, but had favor in the eyes of the king. It's a similar story with Joseph, where people think that they're doing things to harm Joseph. And instead, Joseph ends up in a position to save his entire family. These things I think are so impacting because frequency is everything. If Joseph was selfish like his brothers, when they had the famine, we would not hear about a Joseph today. They would have been dead, dead, dead. Everybody, the whole generation, gone, gone, gone. So because he functioned from a heart of integrity and equity, the whole universe, people's hearts were stirred. Even the king's heart was stirred to bestow favor upon him. And that's the same favor that the saints are supposed to experience. And you guys, as believers, once you stay in the frequency of integrity and equity, and not look at things like, how is this going to benefit me? What am I getting out of this? That is a selfish statement. That's what caused Joseph's brothers to sell him off because they were studying himself. Judas, same thing. Studied himself, like we covered last week, sold Jesus. I mean, he regretted it after because he did something. He took his own life, which shows that he had a sense of remorse. But it didn't have to go that far. If he had only considered how would it benefit the entire team. And so this is something that we could practice every day in our homes by when we make decisions, you're playing a game, for example. This is how simple it is, right? A simple thing like playing game, we can consider, is the volume too loud? Is this going to affect other family members? If you're going to have something to eat in the kitchen and you realize, let's say there are 10 apples on the counter, and oh no, let's say 3 apples remain on the counter. You want one, and you have a family of 5. How many of you all are who? Equity means you would consider, if I eat this, what does it leave for everyone else? How can we share it so that everyone can benefit? That's how simple the frequency is. It's so simple, it sounds so good to be true, too good to be true. And that is literally what it means to work for it. And now, it could be also, no, I have an example in my personal life. My grandmother, which is my mother's mother, I hope she was not a woman who was wealthy. She was, I would say, more on the poor side, right? And so when we go to spend time by her, she didn't have things like running water in her house. Back then, she had buckets. Some of you would probably never understand this concept with the advancement of the age, but where she would have to fill water in a bucket. So to bathe, we'd have to warm water in a pot, put it into a bucket, take a little cup like this, and scoop the water and pour it on ourselves. Make sure you get soap, all good in, and make sure that water lasts. Leo is laughing because she can't understand. He's saying it's primitive. And she didn't have flushing toilets, which means to use the toilet, before she had an actual toilet, she had something called a latrine. A latrine is an outhouse. So it's made, there's a wooden thing around it, and there's a hole dug in the ground. and you have to squat, like squat over it. Make sure you don't fall in there because listen, nobody's gonna come and get you because it's only bad stuff down there. And so that's the kind of poverty my grandmother I was experiencing with my grandmother. But one thing for certain is that no matter how much she did not have, that lady was the most grateful lady I have ever met. She lived from a heart of gratitude. So instead of complaining, I don't have running water, I don't have a toilet, I have never, and she's alive today, she's in her 90s, I've never heard that lady complain about what she does not have. She always utilized what she had to the best of her ability. And she had plenty grandkids because I come from a big family. It's like back then it was like 20 of us. Now we probably 50 of us, like cousins, right? And we would go and spend time by her, sometimes 5 of us a day at a time. And she would have one bottle of soda, small one. And she will divide that small bottle of soda amongst us in little cups, and we'll get about this much, just about this. Everybody just gets a little bit. You literally just get in a taste. But she lived by the concept of equity for all. She would have a pastry like an apple pie, small one, and she would cut it up into pieces. And she was always so happy to give the little bit that she had. And when I talk about these things, it reminds me of her heart. Now, she does not know what we did, but I know for certain is that even though she did not have plenty, she never lacked. Because people were always drawn to give, to bless her with the different things. Even when we started as like I started to work, when I was old enough to work, I would go and I would buy stuff for her because that she invested so much into me. I cannot repay her. But I used to go and buy a little, she likes Welch's grape juice. I used to buy that for her. And she was always hesitant to take it. She would be like, "You don't have things to say about? Gosh, save your money now." She was that type of person to say no. And I'm not saying that we should say no. I'm just saying that once we live by equity, we'd always be considering how are our actions affecting other people. And we'd consider what resources do we have to bless other people with. We would always be considering whether the TV is too loud, if the baby is sleeping, if we make noise, if it's going to wake the baby. Simple things like that. And once you start practicing it, it becomes a lifestyle. And before you know it, when you become an adult, you'd realize that it's implemented in your life flawless. Like it just becomes normal, intuitive. So I'm gonna pause here and let you guys open up the mic to speak a bit and tell me what your thoughts are. Have you guys ever heard about an outhouse? Is this the first time you guys are hearing this? Leo says yes. Okay.
I think I might have heard of an outpost or something.
Oh
You can
yes,
check it
yes,
out
I
on
heard of
Google.
outhouses.
Oh, outpost. Yes, I've never heard of that before.
I'll tell you, it's not the most pleasant place to be. As a kid, I hated going to the outhouse. When I visited my grandma, I was like, oh, the smell. She used to do things like throw charcoal in it, to kill the smell. But I really love the invention of toilets. I can't, I can't imagine what it would be like still using those things. And you guys ever heard about not having water and having to use like buckets to bathe and buckets to cook with? Is that something you heard of before?
Um, Not really, because we're just used to having like running water, but I guess there was a time where you had to get water from like a well or even just maybe collecting rainwater.
Yeah. My parents grew up in a day where they used to bathe by something called a stand pipe, which is a pipe on the side of the road. All the kids from the village would go and they'd open the pipe. And if I can get pictures, I'll bring it for tomorrow's class. And they would take buckets. And the thing about those things long ago is that the community was always involved with each other, and people grew up together. There was a type of oneness. I didn't have to bathe in standpipes as something before my generation, but I am aware of how it works because I saw a few of them. And even today in Trinidad, there still are one or two around, but in the poorer sides of the island, And you know, one thing I've noticed, the kids who live in poverty seem to be the most pleasant children. They have the brightest smiles. Like sometimes we pass, just not check it. Sometimes we pass in those communities, like we drive in, going by here in Trinidad, we still have extreme poverty taking place in some places. And you'd see the kids bathing in dirty water, things that I wouldn't let it touch my skin. But they are so happy. They're kicking ball in the road. They're bareback, running with no shoes on. Um, you know, looking like they don't have much. But one thing I've noticed is that they don't live by comparison. And because of that, they truly enjoy the moments that they have with each other. They truly cherish those memories and they make the best of it. And that's something that I think we can all learn. Because sometimes we can get distracted with social media and think we need this to be happy. Do we really need these things? No, we don't.
Not really.
Leo found a picture of a stamp pack. Oh no, there's no stamp pack. So, okay, so we're wrapping up the class now. I would like to hear feedback from you guys. What do you guys think? What have you learned in today's lesson?
What I learned in today's lesson is, you know, what you said about your grandma. She she never compared to stuff what other people had. But she cared about the stuff what she had and was grateful.
Nice, nice. I love that. Thank you. That's a lovely recap. And what you think you like will be about the kids who, you know, don't compare? What do you think about that? The kids who have nothing and they live by just, I'd say live from the heart. What do you think about that kind of life? Is that something that you practice?
Uh, mm,
Or something you'd like to practice? Like try for
yeah,
one day, guys. Try for one day. I tell my son this. I said, you know, when I was a kid, I spent most of my time outside. We have trees in the yard, and I would be climbing those trees by myself, pretending I have binoculars in my hand because I didn't have binoculars. I'd pretend, and I'll be pretending I'm the neighborhood watch. I'd take leaves and strap them around my skin, just having fun with the things in nature. I would spend a lot of my time, you know, in nature itself, outdoors, just, and I didn't have fancy toys, like what you guys have now. Because I see, like I was telling my son, I said, Leo, do you know that in my days I never had a cell phone like as a child? My first phone I got when I was close to 15, around there.
was it a flip phone?
I said I never had a phone growing up, as you guys have phones. Only when I turned 15, we didn't have tablets. Um, we had TV, but when I was little, it was a black and white TV because back then color TV was now coming in. And so some of the technology that you guys have, we didn't have. And so I was able to become creative outside. Do you think that that's something you guys can do? One day, no technology, no toys, just finding things to do.
I
Yeah,
remember. Go ahead, Lego.
I think we all could probably do this.
Could you say it again?
I believe we all can live without electronics at least for a day.
Right. Try it for a day.
It's like
Unless if,
because
yeah.
we're just so used to it, we're just like I don't know. But as long as maybe if I have some sort of hobby, let's just say if I just have my drawing stuff, like even if it's just the traditional paper and traditional paper and stuff, that will keep me happy.
Yes. And I'm glad that you're being honest, you know, because that's where it starts with being honest, whether or not you could really just use the little bit, you know, and foster a heart of gratitude. When you do that, when you come back to the things you have, you realize how much you appreciate it.
Right. And take care of. I just wanted to share that when me and my sister was little, we didn't have much neither. When me and my sister was little, so because I look at the toys that we have today for the kids, it's like they don't have to use their imagination. So back then when me and my sister was little girls, we didn't have toys, so we had paper though. Our
Mhm.
school paper. We made paper dolls. We made paper chairs for the dot paper dolls to sit in the chair. We made the dining room set, and all this was made with paper on the floor. So it was really tedious, but that's what we had to do at that time. And that's what I see that the less you have of those things, um, you're more creative to me, I
Yeah.
think. I was thinking about the children in the village too. They have more time to be um together in unity and to be more creative. So that's one of the things, because our children, like the children I have here now, my children, they rather play with a box than to play with the toy.
That's where the creativity starts. I hope they
Right,
stay there where they,
right.
that
Yes. And I just
is
wanted to share,
super.
can I share that verse about the comparing?
What verse is that? Let me see. I'm not pulling
Second
up the chat.
Corinthians 10,
12.
12, about not comparing what the Bible tells us.
What does it say? I can't pull up the Bible.
Okay. I got it pulled up right here on my phone. Oh, my phone closed down, but I got it right here. It says, okay, I get all these commercials off of here. Um, for we dare not class ourselves or compare ourselves with those who commend themselves, but they measure themselves by themselves, and comparing themselves among themselves are not wise. That's what the word said. And it's telling
Wisdom
you
right there.
that's not wise right
That's
there.
the beginning of the book. That is
Yes.
that is that
You
is
said that's the
that is
beginning.
a powerful verse.
Yeah, that's what came up in my head while you was talking. I'm like, yeah, that's that verse. And that's the word. What did we learn about what the word is, y'all? Can y'all share? Do y'all remember?
The word is thought.
Whose thought?
That's
Elohim's
that.
thought. But if you go more into it, it would be God's and you and your thoughts because you are one.
Oh,
Also
yeah.
can bring it to light too.
Yes. Awesome. All right, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut in like this.
Well, we're wrapping this up now. Anybody wanted to share anything else before we go?
Okay, so what I end up learning from the class, just summoning it all up, other than just or basically about our reference points, is that we should be very careful what we're looking at, what we are focusing on, because if it's not lined up with what God's promises, it could, I guess you could say, can able to have that saying, "You reap what you sow," kind of, yeah, that promise. And then for the other part is being happy with what appreciate what you end up having. Even with me, I can just say that because I end up having a job now, even though it may not be my dream job, but I am basically happy that at least I can able to pull in some income, and I'm happy of where I am.
That is awesome. That is the
Yes.
best place to be. I'm gonna tell you
Yes.
guys.
Mhm.
You are in
Yes.
there. Like having inner peace is the most important thing in life,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that this does not define you. Even if you're serving tables, when I started working, when I started as a kid, I was about 16 when I had my first job. I was working whilst I was in high school, and I was in a supermarket here in Trinidad. We have something called, like when you pack the groceries, somebody to carry the groceries for you. So that was
Right.
what I was doing, and I started off there. And I remember I was 16, and there were times I was feeling like horrible, and inside I was like, I felt like at that time, like I was embarrassed because I was thinking that, I'm collecting tips from people. And,
Mhm.
now I look back and I think to myself that The only reason why I felt like that is because I was comparing myself to other people's jobs.
Wow.
And
Yes.
if I didn't do that, I would have enjoyed it a lot more and used it as an opportunity to connect with people and, to be a blessing to others and, just be light and be who I am. And instead, I spent all that time feeling like, oh, this is what I'm doing and whatever, not knowing that I was doing the same thing that the children of Israel were doing. And guess what? I was stuck there for a long time.
Okay. Wow.
Like the children of Israel, I was stuck for a good while until I was able to advance myself. That's the thing about comparison. So
Yeah, that's like a frequency. That's like a static frequency. That's how you turn the channel on, the static, you be trying to get it sharp. So comparing would be like that static in there hindering.
And if ever you all want a mental picture of what comparison does, think about how many people, if you have access to see these things, do plastic surgery and it goes bad. The reason why they're doing plastic surgery is because they're comparing themselves with somebody else.
Right.
I've seen people try to do plastic surgery on their eyes and their nose and their face, and it got messed up really bad.
It just doesn't look right. It just doesn't look
No.
right.
They look completely different, for want of a better word. And the
Right.
reason why that happens is because they're comparing themselves and not being grateful with who they are.
Right.
And I'll get more personal. In my family, we're known for having more of a biggish nose, right?
Mhm.
And so some of my family members are like, a little bit embarrassed. And that's something I learned. I said, you know what? The only reason why people feel like they're uncomfortable with their nose is because they're comparing it to somebody else's nose.
Right.
I started to appreciate, man, you look so good. Look at you.
That's right. Positive
And
self-talk.
that's what we're supposed to do. Enjoy our smiles, enjoy our face, our hair,
Right.
every aspect of us. Enjoy it rather than compare it to something else to tell us that,
Right.
to use something else to tell us, as Lego B was saying, whether or not we're good enough.
Right.
So I'm gonna hand the mic to you, Holy Sister Odiela, before I go on.
Okay, well, thank you for the lesson. Thank you. Yeah, just with that comparison, another thought came up that you are a unique being. You're like a fingerprint. All the fingerprints are not the same. And so it's like you are unique. So, know your value. And that's what we're here to do, is to learn those things about ourselves. Yep. So thank you for the lesson. Anybody else have anything else that you want to say before we close out?
Also,
No.
to add on your little uniqueness part, you can also look at snowflakes. Not all snowflakes and having
Right.
a different design.
That's
It's like
right.
us. They're can't really replicate the same thing because they were just unique like that.
Right. So
I love that.
I do too. It's very nice. I'm like, wow. And I didn't know that your fingerprints is not the same on both hands.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. It's actually I didn't know that.
And no one has the same fingerprints. So
No,
they're not even
that's
twins.
crazy.
That's not even twins have the same fingerprints. I'm like, wow, God is amazing. I'm like, he is. So that really intrigued me. But okay, because we could be doing this all night. Anybody have anything else to say? Oh, when they go.
I'm all good. I'm all good.
Okay. How about you, Lego B? I think Lionel went to sleep on us.
Yeah, I don't see it.
I got nothing else to say.
Okay. Well, this is good. Can't wait to see what's happening tomorrow.
Yes, tomorrow we can meet again.
All right, y'all. Okay. Everybody's okay? All right.
Everybody.
Lego B, can you pray us out?
Sure.
Okay,
Alright.
thank you.
Thank you, Lord, for this moment. I bless every one of you to have a restful sleep. And I thank Miss Katura for teaching this lesson. And
Amen.
Do you say amen?
Oh, amen.
Amen.
Because my
looking for
headset might be screwy now.
Oh,
Well, if you're having problems, Uriah, maybe next time just use my laptop and see if that's better.
No. I meant my headset, my blue headset.
Oh, okay. Well,
Because the cards could be screwy since when my headphones are broke, well, a little bit broken, and this one side has to be smaller than the other.
mm,
I mean,
well, we'll figure out something.
I'll show you when you get home.
Yeah, well, we'll figure out something, Uriah.
you guys are too sweet. Police is still delay muted.
Oh, thank you. I was getting ready to say, oh, well, okay, well, I'll see everybody tomorrow.
All right. You'll have a
All
good
right.
night, guys.
Really
You
appreciate y'all.
guys too.
Mwah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.